Hi, welcome to another video with my friend here, Kevin. We're gonna talk about should we worship the religions of our colonizers. That's the topic for today, and something I've been thinking about for some time. um, and I guess I'll kind of give it a preface, right? So I was born in Kenya. I'm from the tribe of Kisis, and my parents raised me as a
Abagusi.
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 Abagusi. And so
Kisi was actually a word that was used by the British.
the British, the
Yeah.
colonizers,
Mhm.
we're trying to not follow that anymore, right?
We're done with the colonizers.
I mean, shoot, the topic of the video is poignant, isn't it? And so I was raised a Christian. Specifically, the denomination is Seventh Day Adventists, right? And I went to a Christian boarding school, and in the Christian boarding school, I this is in Kenya, so they beat me a lot. Probably because I was also very stubborn, and because of that, I, 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 I think that there's a part of me that has a bit of anger towards Christianity because I grew up from the age of like 9 to 13 in a boarding school where they espoused all these Christian beliefs, but in the reality of it they beat me like I was a slave. And I this week, I'm in the U.S. now, and so this week, at our church, my parents are there, my sister and brother are there. They're having like the youth Sabbath, right, where they're bringing all the youth, and it's kind of an event for the church. And I remember all week hearing about it and just getting viscerally angry. I tell you this because this shows you my bias, and as much as I am biased against Christianity for having grown up through it so like in so many different stages of my life, I am able to articulate and see that I am biased against it, but it still rules majority of how I think, from how I think about women, relationships, and marriage to how I even think about morality. And the thing though is that I think Kevin does a really good job in being able to show the counter perspective because I am biased against Christianity, not because of anything that I disagree with in the doctrine itself. I think that there's some things I agree with, but fundamentally how I grew up with it, especially at a pivotal point in my life between the age of 9 to 13 with no parents, and I was in a boarding school where I was alone and I was being just basically beaten and mistreated. I have an association to the religion that most other people might not, but that does give me a perspective in which I can be able to break out of that sort of thought process that the religion kind of fosters, to think differently about it and to search for other ways of spiritual enlightenment. So that's all to say, should we worship the religions of our colonizers? What do you think?
Well, I watched your previous video and I thought it was a really good video. Brought up some good talking points. And I'd like to start off by understanding a little more about your perspective on
Mm-hmm.
this and ask you a few questions just to
Calibrate.
calibrate. So let's get into it. So you are saying, and let me understand here, you're calling it, should we worship the religions of
Of
our
our
colonizers?
Yeah.
So specifically, we're talking about from the African perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and we're talking about all black people, all
Just more like
from the
Christian, like
slave and colonization.
right. So for that, I'd say um, Christian Kenyans or Kisis, right? I
Hmm.
can only talk about like me as a Kisi from Kenya who went to who my tribe adopted the religion of Christianity, and not
Hmm.
even the whole of Christianity, a subset of it that is the Seventh Day Adventists, right?
Is the vendetta only against Christianity?
It's the only one that I have extensive
There's some
relationships
Muslims
with.
in our community too.
There is, but I wasn't raised as a Muslim, right? So I
Mm.
can't quite articulate that perspective of like, okay, like some Muslims might come into this and be like, hey, that's not true about our doctrine, nor is it true about our religion. So I'm not able to
Mm.
say that the topic could be better. Hey, should we worship the should we worship Christianity, the religion of our colonizers?
So there's also I asked these to get to
Mm-hmm.
um, the the real target of what
Mm-hmm.
we want to break down to,
Mm-hmm.
because when we say worship the religion of our colonizers, obviously we have to identify who's the colonizers, because uh, if we're talking about specifically from our tribe, um, we'll talk about the British people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we also need to see that there was also imported Islam, and so there would be. Are we going to also say like? And you brought up doctrine, and if this is true about, you know, each religion, etc. So will this be a political discussion of where we're not going to talk about too much in what's in Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
or is it the fact that the politics of it being something that was um, perhaps pushed on and forced into
Mm-hmm.
um, our people, right?
It's yeah, it's more of like I think of it as think about the language we're speaking right now, right? English is fundamentally a language of our colonizers, right? We were colonized, we speak English because that is what they spoke, and we have to speak it to be able to play in their game, and we are assimilated to it at this point. But the difference between why I didn't say that should we speak English, right, is because English does have an economic value to it. To speak English, you're then able to engage with the larger markets of the world. The larger, like you're able to participate in a larger sphere of human, activity. And because English and, American English, British English has like permeated through most corners of the world as a dominant language that people speak, right?
That's
This
interesting, actually, because I feel sometimes about English, about the same way that you might feel about religion sometimes,
hmm,
because it kind of, as a person who likes languages, I learn a lot of languages. It does bother me sometimes where I'm like, why am I only learning and like what's in vogue and everything? Like I'm always learning, like I learned Spanish,
hmm,
and I was like proud of myself that it's like, oh, I'm getting conversational in Spanish. But then I think about the history of Spanish, or the history of English, even being something that is a language that comes and dominates an area to the point that, a lot of the population doesn't know. You know what I'm
hmm,
saying? So like you look at um, groups, the diaspora groups of Africans in Haiti, in Latin America, they speak French, they speak Spanish, they speak, they don't remember their native tongue.
hmm.
So in a way, they've also been, you
They've
know,
lost that, yeah.
they've converted.
Right.
And language is a way that in the same way as religion works, language can work in the same way. It gives you the perspective
Hmm,
of the person who you're the language you're speaking. And
hmm,
I noticed that when I speak different languages, say like Japanese, there's a feeling of like, oh, I have to be very sensitive about how I say this to this person who is of higher status or younger status, or there's all these honorifics and this whole way that you see society from them, and you can see their society is very structured and not necessarily class structured, but they there's levels of like you're always cognizant of who's older than you, who's your superior, who's senpai,
hmm,
kohai
hmm,
relationships always, right? And
hmm,
that's gonna be depending on if you use san at the end of your word, or you're just calling them by their first name or
hmm,
whatever, because that's how their language is, right?
hmm,
So you get into that mindset,
hmm,
and English puts you into a certain mindset, and so does our language, Kisi and everything. They're so dramatic. Like
hmm.
the way that we we
Yeah,
talk is so dramatic. That's how it feels to me,
yeah.
right? So it's also like a conversion of your mind, and now you're stuck in a certain way, and you've in the same way that you've been assimilated into a religion, and now you're working on the colonizers' playbook, or like how they see the world, their
Mm-hmm.
worldview, and now you're playing in their game. In the
Mm-hmm.
same way, once you speak their language, you're also being co-opted. And sometimes I wonder, am I less African now? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know any like African languages as well as I know all these other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that bothers me sometimes. It's just like, damn, I got, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. In it actually lies the distinction I really wanted to bring up, which
Mm-hmm.
is that it's interesting that you have a similar perspective about language that I have about religion, because fundamentally under that the question of like should we worship the religion of our colonizers, the thesis that I wanted to build up to was essentially that these religions do give you a world model and a
Mm,
way of seeing the world, a way of talking about the world, and you're placed within that world that psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally anchors you towards a certain like world view. And so if you come across somebody who like think about how when you talk to your parents about, hey, this is our Kisi heroes, they're gonna be like, no, they don't look like that, that's not how they are, this is like this version of Kisi history does not match up with the version of history that I romanticize viewed from the perspective of Christianity. And I kind of feel like what you're talking about with language is that even with language, it forms a framework of how to see the world
yeah.
based on the words you use, how to even put those words together. You have to have a certain perspective about the world, and that's how you're able to articulate what you're trying to communicate through that language, your perspective about the world that you're experiencing. There's a really good book that talks about language viruses and how like different words and spell, like think about what a spell is. It's sequences of words put in a way that co-opts a certain perspective of how to think about something,
Yeah.
right? And so as you kind of brought in, like language does that, right? There was a psychology study that was done where they interviewed like a Latin American tribe which didn't have a word for green or blue, and they didn't see that color, so they would show them different colors. I think it was blue. It was blue. So they would show them different shades of green, and they'd have names for each of those shades of green, shades that we didn't even have names for or words for, right? But when they showed them blue, they'd be like greenish, right? And so that kind of showed that they didn't quote unquote see blue. They just perceived it as another version of green. But since we have the word for blue, we perceive it as a completely different concept, which changes our worldview. Which, like, their worldview is a bit different because they're able to see way more granular shades of green because they have names for it. Versus if we looked at those shades of green, we'd be like green. Instead of like, oh, green is like green, like light blue or turtle shell green or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing about both what you actually brought up with language and what I think about religion, and why even the question of should we worship the religion of our colonizers, the reason why for me that I feel it's a bit more important is because religions fundamentally speak about spirituality. They are philosophy about how to deal with the human condition of existing, having a finite existence within an infinite universe, and how you can navigate your way through life with a sense of peace and not suffer due to the uncertainty of like, oh, I could die at any time, or your own thought process and your thoughts. And I think fundamentally most religions that I've kind of explored have a sense of compassion within them, right? This is why this conversation isn't about the doctrines of these religions and whether we should follow them, but just in the sense that should we follow the religions that came to us from parties who wished to coerce our people and colonize them and dominate them. The reason why I don't place language in the same way, I don't feel like language fits into that, is because language economically does benefit us. It does help us be able to interact with other people from other places who speak the same English language, and we can engage in commerce. We can trade. We can, like, think about it. If you didn't speak English and you spoke something like Spanish, right? You'd still have opportunities, but would you have the same level of opportunities if you spoke Spanish versus if you spoke English? A lot of the code we write is in English, right? And so in that sense, I'm like, okay, well, this is helpful to me to speak English versus is it helpful for me to have these Christian thought processes that might limit how I see the world to only a Western Christian perspective? Is that even beneficial to me? I think fundamentally that is the question, the sub question of should we worship the religions of our colonizers? It is the sub question of like,
How is it
is
beneficial?
it yeah is this benefiting us economically in a social standing? Are we better off because we worship Christianity compared to the countries like China or India who were colonized by British people, but they kept some of their like Hinduism, right, or Buddhism, right? The Chinese kept their religions, and they still have a sense of identity and a sense of culture that allows them to have a sense of identity in the larger stage of international politics. And I kind of feel that because they chose to keep their culture, their religions, their way of thinking, it allows them to have a collective sense of self that enables them to perform at the world stage in a better economic, political, and social way than we who don't have that. Africans, as much as, and Kenyans and Kisis, as much as we have a sense of identity as Kisi people, in the larger grand stage of people, most people who watch this video probably are not going to know what even the Kisi tribe is. They only know of African, and maybe they'll know about Kenya, but they don't know it to the granular perspective that we do as people who come from there, right? I'll look at somebody and be like, oh, no, he's a Kalenjin, he's a Maasai. But to everybody else, you're African, you're Kenyan, right? And even then, I think there's a I'm getting into so much with that, with that. So I'm gonna just kind of pause it here and say like
I
the
think we need to go a little deeper because you're talking about utility, and is this you is the religion aspect useful to Africans? And I would say historically we would have to say yes. And a lot of times what people why people converted to a certain religion was for political gain, right? To protect themselves, to feel more assimilated in the dominant culture. In the same way you speak the language, you adopt the religion and the language so you can communicate better and participate in society, right? So whenever people would take over a certain place, like let's talk about the Moors in Spain, right? So the when Islam came to Spain and they took over that whole peninsula for hundreds of years, right? The people who were left there and the Jews, they would convert to Islam and they would follow that whatever, or even like the Europeans who would live in Islamic society, right? They would be Islamic, right? And why? Because Muslims can't enslave other Muslims. There's certain kind of things that are afforded to you by being a part of their religion, right? They're gonna treat you as a fellow, Muslim rather than the enemy and infidel. And there might be similar things going on in Christianity, maybe not so on the nose, but implied, you know? And I'm not sure, we'd have to go dig in the past and see what happened to these places like Latin America and Africa, where, when they come over, is it kind of like, if you don't convert, we're going to see you as a savage. And we do this to savages. But if you become a civilized Christian, I see you as a brother and your social standing will increase. So then now there's a certain kind of incentive
yeah.
to, if I become this, if I speak your language and I assimilate now, you'll treat me and give me more rights in the society, right? So in that way, it's useful in almost like a language, especially in the old world where church and state were pretty much the same thing, especially in the Muslim world. So that's definitely why a lot of West Africa is still Muslim, because all the slavery that was going on, and a lot of it was being taken part of by the Moors and the Berbers and these slavers that were Islamic slavers. But if you convert to Islam, hey, how you gonna slave a Muslim? Like, hey, I'm your brother. Yeah, so it'd be messed up. So some people do that. So I did want to go a little deeper though and be like, I feel like there's also a sense of like um, from away from the practical argument about this is more of like a uh, I don't want to. And is it a pride thing or is just like but I'm African. Why do I have to follow? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel a little shameful to now follow the religion of
Other
somebody
people
who
who
conquered
colonize
you?
you.
And I feel
I
like we have to get to that because that's the. I feel like
Dude,
that's the
I
true
that's where I
essence.
come from it. Now is more I get to that perspective. Like I holistically feel that viscerally. Like I feel disgraced, dirty. Like not I don't feel good about Christianity in the way that maybe I did in the past. And that's why I prefaced it with being like, maybe my anger comes from how my relationship with Christianity was growing up. Because for me, it was not a place of refuge, but it exemplified a place that this was a boarding school of Christians who treated me terribly. Not even just that, it's just that now as I've
A
grown,
form of control then.
it's a form of control. But now that I've grown a lot older, and my brand is like, oh, terraform the Sahara Desert, and giving Africans a like not even just Africans, just creating this vision of the future that is Afrofuturistic, but also can give Africans and Black people and people like myself something to look forward to and something to work towards, and maybe even unite under. I have to consider as the person working towards that goal, how do I relate to these religions that people who I will eventually lead should relate to, right? Now, I can look at historical figures like Alexander the Great or how Rome used to be when they conquered different places. They let them keep their religions, but still paid tithe and followed the Roman rule or the Roman law or, the Alexandrian law, whatever that was, right?
Well, Romans specifically, they remember they actually required you to at least burn offerings to the Roman
The Roman
gods
gods.
as a way of tribute and also to show that you have to learn about the dominant culture
Mm-hmm.
and show that you're part of this too. It was only the Jewish people
Who
who
were
they
like,
made
nah,
exceptions because they were ready to die for it. Where everybody else is like, that seems very reasonable. Like it's like,
the
well,
Jews was like, nope.
we have 100 gods. Just throw one more. Is like, what's the difference? It's like this. Is he adding a new god to the pantheon?
Right? All
Cool.
right, cool. What do you
Like,
want me to burn? Some rings?
the Jews are like, there's one God. There's no way we're gonna do it. And
They ended up winning the Roman Catholic Church.
well, I guess yeah, in a way,
Right? Yeah, because
but it
eventually
was anti-Jewish though, because the
the
Christians were anti-Jewish. So like Jews get discriminated
yeah,
against for a
yeah.
long time
I
in
see that
the
they're all
old
part of the
world.
same party, bro. All three of them are like, and this is might be blasphemous, but they all stem from Abrahamic religion. Like this, we're getting
Right,
into the
Samaric.
doctrines of it, and I'm like, I think that's a dicey topic because it ends up being like deviating from the core concept of should we in modern day continue to worship these religions into the future, right? Long into the future, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, will can Africa develop into its own if we are still importing concepts and ideas and frameworks of reality from other people in other places who colonized us and do have a vested interest in Africans not being united to be able to take control over the vast amount of resources we have and the opportunity that we have that we are some of the youngest population in the world of working age who can work towards building a stronger, better civilization. From that perspective, I question should we even worship these religions that give us a reality model and a way of viewing the world that keeps us into a certain pattern of behavior that might not even be conducive to us?
There was some interesting books I read or lectures. I can't remember. I got these ideas from somewhere
Was it the
where it was not that they were saying that the move that the Roman Empire took to move to Christianity, because I want to go on the place to a place where we find out that this is the way humanity works in a sense. And first I'll talk about the Romans, right? because if we're going to talk about our colonizers, this is not their religion. They got colonized by the Romans who were the ones who adopted the religion from somewhere else, right? And then spread it other places. And then the British people end up exporting it to the rest of the world. But the British people are Anglo-Saxons. They're Celts, and they believe in runes and shit from like back then. They believe in Thor, and I don't know if there's that, like
The
some of
Celtic
them. You
religions.
know what I'm saying? Those Celtic religions, the Dravidians and spirits of the
and
elves and shit. That's a lot of where their stuff comes in.
magical fantasy.
Right.
Okay.
Hobbits. That's there's something in there what they used to believe in,
yeah.
but it's got they got colonized, and now they don't follow their own thing anymore, right? So they're in the same boat. Now let's think about why Christianity was useful. Now, somebody made the argument that it's not so much that, oh, this is something like, this is the one true religion, but it just became very useful for state building. They looked at it and they were like, wait a second. Constantine, or whoever ended up,
Charlemagne.
well, Constantine is the one who was the Roman emperor who was credited at the time for, he had a vision of God. That's what he said. He put on a shield.
Yeah.
And
Did he move the capital also to the Middle East?
The Byzantine, yeah. So he gets everybody under that new religion. Like, hey, we're turning. And actually, I think he didn't make it official. It was the guy after him. But he decriminalized Christianity. First, you got to decriminalize weed before you legalize it. So he decriminalized it. Then the next guy decided it was like official. And they talk about how the power structures in Christianity made it so that it was useful for controlling people, like in the sense of one God. There's no division. It's just like you can have a central.
It's a clear hierarchy.
Right. Clear hierarchy, and in the way that you can have a person be the vicar of Christ. That invention.
Legitimacy.
There you go.
You're
right.
I gain my power to control you and rule you because it comes from God.
All your other bullshit, because previously they're being very tolerant, right? But now they're like, nah, none of that other, we're not letting anybody else do it. We are Christians, and this is the one true God, and I am his voice. Yeah. So
you better listen
this
up.
This is the guy right here is the representation of God on earth, political power, right? And now they're the Holy Roman Empire, holy from God, nigga, like this.
There ain't nothing else. That's a good point.
So for statecraft, and then the English don't change it. They become the top dogs, and they're like, why change something?
Works.
So I'll just say this last thing. When it comes to the usefulness of, like, should Africans use this? If it serves them. And from a purely political standpoint, if you don't have a better replacement for this, right, that works into what you're trying to build in your vision, right? It's like, do we just go back to tribal beliefs and animal sacrifice, whatever we're doing, ancestor worship? If you can make a way that it would just, like, for your vision of how you want to run the government and how it can unify people, if it makes sense for that and everybody can agree to it, then yes. I think the Christian religion, they talk about how it ended up just fitting well into the Roman system, and they just co-opted it, and it was great, right? So in this sense, it's like, all right, you have to start over, which is going to cause a lot of, you're going to roughly, you know what I'm saying? And you might end up making it harder for yourself in the long run. And the Europeans coming through and, like, already being very unified in this and having fervor and everything. Actually, the English changed. Actually, they did create their own thing, but it was an offshoot. Like, it's the same thing, but we run it. Okay. Not the Roman guy. This is the Holy Church of England, and we have the Pope.
King Henry? No, King Henry. The one who killed nine, like had nine wives.
So yeah, he
Yeah,
wanted
it
to
was
marry
yeah,
somebody,
yeah. And so he had
some
to like
baker,
yeah,
and
and he needed to get out of divorce, and so the Pope wouldn't like
yeah,
allow
said
him,
no.
and so he's like, man,
Nah.
I'm a king, bro. You better recognize. Hey, look, we do nothing on this side, bro. And
The
so,
Anglicans, that's how we get
yep.
the Anglicans. So he's just like, you know what? It suits me and what I need in my government right now to it's the same shit. Like we're not gonna change it. Hey people, relax. We still worship the same thing, but we're gonna like that guy's a false prophet. Come on.
He's
He's a
gonna,
vicar
yeah.
of Christ. Says
Jeez,
who?
bro.
I didn't vote for him. so so
So yeah, and so
we have
he
our
ended
own
up
cardinals.
making his own thing, and he became both the Pope and the head of state.
Mm-hmm.
Because then he became like the one who represented the God, like the word
It's a
of God.
power
On
play.
yeah, it's a power play. And the thing about it that you bring up a good point of is that religions have established a structure of how to think about the world that is conducive and very useful in being able to govern people in terms of like the aspects of religion is that think about how what my parents and my siblings are doing right now. They're sitting in a lecture hall listening to somebody tell them words about things that they can read and like think for themselves, but they're going there and they're listening to this person tell it in such passion and fervor that they don't like it doesn't leave even if they can think about it and question it. At no point in that lecture can you put your hand up and be like, I read the same chapter,
I don't
I
remember
didn't come
you.
to that same conclusion. What are you talking about? You know? But you're being swept up in the moment, the fervor, the experience, the music, the the environment of it that makes it easy for you to be indoctrinated into a certain way of thinking without you even having to question it. And I think that there's value in that. Now, the question fundamentally is I agree with you. Actually, I think the ending of that question was that I'm not going to tell people what to worship and tell them like, no, don't worship the religions of the people who colonized you. If it is working for you and you can be a better person by believing in it and the doctrines of it, then continue to do so. Because for me, I don't relate to any ancient African religions. Not only do I not have enough knowledge about them to be able to practice them properly, even if I was to have enough knowledge about them to practice them properly, I exist at a fundamentally different way of life and reality right now that they might not even be applicable. And because they're not applicable, I might not relate to them. And so I cannot go back and say, oh, well, we used to make sacrifices, we used to worship the god of the land and do all that and all these rituals. I can't say that oh, we should go back to worship our ancient religions. I do think fundamentally that there is probably an opportunity to design something newer and better, but not design it in a way that it's a cult, which fundamentally is also another thing that you have to tiptoe through to get to the other side of a dominant spiritual way of thinking. I think that a lot of the ways states are designed, if you think about it, like if I start a new religion today and I'm like, oh yeah, here's my great thoughts about how salvation works and enlightenment of your soul so you don't suffer, right? The state could just as easily say, that's a cult. That's a cult. You're a cult. You and your people, yeah, we're banning that. So it's not that even that it can't be a personal thing. I can't go out there and say, okay, I started a new religion and here's what we're doing, right? It has to be that I put out the question so that people can think for themselves and figure out okay, I am believing in this thing, but it's a personal choice, not a reflexive behavioral and psychological like pattern of like coexisting because your parents used to do it and their parents did it before them. Like you're doing it because you studied it, you researched it, and you found out that this religion fits very well with the kind of person I want to be, right? Think of I'd say I believe in God. I'd say if I had to pick any, Zen Buddhism is the one which I probably feel the closest and most aligned to. It's not a religion, it's not a doctrine. I don't have to clap my fingers or my hands and like say something like that. It's just the way that it helps me connect to an inner sense of self, but also choose to be good with other people and compassionate is fundamentally why I choose to read and study more about that. So spiritually, I am whole. Because at the end of the day, that like if you're going to build a new society and a new way of people like organizing themselves, then you have to be able to give them a way for their spirit to have like how do I even put this? We're both physical, mental, and spiritual. I think fundamentally that's what I can break myself into. And body wise, physically, I go to the gym. Mentally, I study and I get better at like my skill set. Spiritually, I have to have a spiritual practice, a way of connecting to my sense of self. If it's breath and breathing and being more aware, then that is my path to becoming a more aligned version of myself presently with a higher form of myself. And I think that aspect of a human has to be catered to not by the state but by a like specific rituals that allow you to connect to that sense of presence, self, and being. And I think that I'm not gonna like the answer for that. Should we worship the religions of our colonizers? It is not yes or no. It is worship what you find aligns you better to your higher self, so that you can be a more compassionate, good person who adds value to the world, rather than a a person who's ignorant, arrogant, and an asshole who's gonna go around like kill people, steal from people, and I think that's also what religion does a good job of. It's give people a moral framework in which they can function within the world in, right? They can relate to each other with, and that's yeah. To connect to kind of what you're saying.
What did you put on your pros and cons here?
Um, So, yeah, Pro provides a philosophical and spiritual framework for dealing with the uncertainty of life. So it's like it provides a framework for people to deal with the uncertainty of life. And even if you said it best actually earlier, it was like if I was to say, okay, hey, I'm the president of this new country. We're outlawing Christianity. Now what? Like people are still going to need a framework to understand the world through spiritually. And I think religions offer such a good framework for people to be able to deal with the good and the bad of the world. It gives people a reason to be good too, a moral framework in which they can function through.
Mm-hmm.
The other pro is community. I don't go to church because of the religion. I go to church for the community. And if you think about our Kenyan community church, or Kisi Community Church fundamentally, it is a lot about the community, a lot about the friends we grew up with, the functions that they go through. And religion is a way that they give themselves reasons to continue doing that community thing. What I've always wondered is, can I have the community without the religion? Can I be like the Italians, right? Or can we be like the Jews are fundamentally deeply rooted in Jewism, right? And
Yeah.
that's a tight coupling of community with religion. And so in ours, I'm like, can I just hang out with my friends and like in a community setting, but not have to clap and sing and dance for this God I don't believe in? And the community part is also beautiful because people come together when somebody dies and people engage in these community functions, weddings and that kind of stuff, and it creates a sense of like togetherness, a sense of we can help each other when we're done. We're in a foreign land, it's just us versus the world, and we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure it out. Think of the Somali community, right? They have their own community and their own behaviors, and even then, Africa. There was something you said earlier where it was like, oh yeah, like Africa can like we're so diverse, so much languages, cultures, like tribes that like it's hard to imagine a single religion, right? And it's even harder to imagine that today because if it was like 100, 200, 300 years ago, we're building an army and going and colonizing everybody else and conquering them and telling them what to do. If that like it was 200 years ago, that would work because you would just amass a huge enough army, go through the rest of Africa, and colonize all of them, conquer all of them. And anybody who says the other way, you would burn their village to the ground, so that it's basically a warning to anybody else who wants to rebel. And they would bend the knee and they would follow the dominant way, and you'd end up with language like this and religions like you do. But nowadays, that is a no no. You cannot do that. You cannot. come here and burn down our villages, kill our women, enslave our children, and murder their daddies, and tell their kids how to live life because that is wrong. And as humanity, we have learned that is wrong, and we're not going to do that to the Palestinians or to the Ukrainians or to anybody else who disagrees with the dominant powers. Right? Okay, so we can't do it like that. All right, so there's going to be a social contract where we all chip into a bowl of ideas of a new religion we want to create. And the whole point of this video is just to create a discussion around should we worship the religions of our colonizers? It is provocative because yes, they're religions of the people who colonized us. The people, like as you said, there was value in how the Romans adopted Christianity. There was value in how the English adopted Christianity, right? And is it valuable for us to adopt those same frameworks? Not only that, there's a dominant split in Africa between Christianity and Islam, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it like as a leader, right? Let's put ourselves in the mindset of a possible leader who can unite Africa in a modern day where you can't colonize everybody and like take the shortest path where you murder as many people and rule the rest with fear until that fear becomes their mode of existence, and the only way that they can get away from that fear is by following what you tell them to follow, and then they have a sense of relief and catharsis because they're not afraid to be what they are because what they are is what you told them to be. All
Mm.
right, I'll pause there just because that was a whole.
Yeah, and it seems like you're coming to a conclusion of like yes to this question if you truly believe it. Um, I I'm still a bit and I agree, like obviously we're not gonna force people to do anything when it comes to religion, you know, or maybe we're in an age of enlightenment where, you know, we want to champion individual freedom to choose things like religion above all else. And I did want to say that we I've noticed that over time, religion has come to reflect the state of mind and the need of evolution that people have as a human race. When you look at animalistic um, and ancestor worship, those are for small communities, you know,
Mm-hmm.
tightly knit. When you're now ruling an organization of multiple tribes, lots of people, and you need to organize and share resources, you need a religion of organization, of order, and a way to um, you know, decide what
Mm-hmm.
are we all going to do on this day? How do we treat each other? There's laws in the book of Leviticus, there's laws in the book of Deuteronomy that organize what you should even eat,
Mm-hmm.
because the Israelites had just become such a large nation, a large amount of people, that they needed this kind of organization from their religion to tell them exactly what to do, because now we have a central figure leading a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, and the legitimacy, right, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, how why should people follow this, and why should people die for this? Because now I'm also asking you to war against other non-believers, and why should we be able to take their land? Well, God wills it.
That's such a shortcut.
Right. Well, God wills it and we'll be better off. So we need you to die for this. And God will make sure that
Your soul is
you're
good. Your family
properly
is good.
rewarded in the afterlife. So
It's very useful.
it is a useful thing. And I think once we get to the age of enlightenment and we need people to be more educated and have this, you know, individualism is starting to come up, and you're getting the population to read, write, and be more involved, and we're getting more output from almost the, you know, the normal person on the street. We have a need for Protestantism, right, where yeah, you can choose your own interpretation of this,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be for what you want it to be, right? Like people can start choosing how to organize themselves because they've come to a level
Mm-hmm.
that they are civilized enough to, you know, follow the rules and figure out what is going to be useful, but you know, adjust it for what their needs are, right? And I think Protestantism was kind of like a like the reflection of the human need for that,
Mm-hmm.
right? As we got into a stage of more enlightenment, people are not reading and writing during the
Mm-hmm.
times of the Bible, and so you could just dictate to them.
Mm-hmm.
Now people are reading the Bible, is like, this doesn't say this.
Yeah.
But it's also useful because now your normal citizen is going to be able to do more things with
Mm-hmm.
understanding language and being educated. And we get to the modern world where we're having
Mm-hmm.
so much output. Um, so where are we now? Like we are in this. Who's the author who said God is dead?
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche. We're in this Nietzsche post Nietzsche world where it seems like God is dead, right?
And we killed
And
him.
we need a religion in a way that reflects what people need now, because there is a sense of uh, disillusionment, and
Mm-hmm.
not just, it's like I feel like we're almost past, and where every society is gonna get to this is like, sure, Africans are maybe caught up in this, but their kids are not. It's not gonna take that long for them to just be what Americans are and just be like, why am I going to church again? Like this,
What is this
So
game?
that's where
Mm-hmm.
we'll end up. And so at that point, where how do you make sure you don't go to this end?
Depressive
Yeah, this end of, what's the term?
anarchy or
Not anarchy, but when you don't believe in anything.
atheism,
Not atheism.
agnostic,
What they say about Nietzsche's philosophy, where somebody's just
existentialism, or
uh,
all right, say talk about it and maybe I'll come up with it.
it's like when somebody, they don't believe in anything, but they don't have hope for the future, and they're just like
Pessimist,
um,
like an atheist pessimist. You don't believe in God.
it's an A word. You're not
Agnostic?
apathetic, but
No, not agnostic.
you know the word I'm trying to reach for here, where you've become is really associated with Nietzsche. You've become, dang.
That's all
Anyways,
right.
yeah. So it's just this kind of, like, it's a negative connotation word where it's just like, dang, what are we like? Oh,
Yeah,
we're
what are we
just
gonna
gonna
do?
live and die
Yeah.
and it's over. So
Uh-huh.
at that point, you know, where do you steer society in a way that would meet the spiritual needs of people? Because I think there is always spiritual needs, but
Mm-hmm.
also service or benefit the society
Mm-hmm.
also, right? To
Mm-hmm.
keep people moral, keep people organized, and as we organize to this more of this homogeneous world where maybe we are, like you said, more humanist globalism, where we can share resources on the level of the planet
Mm-hmm.
and maybe be interplanetary.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of shared religion or shared like mental space do we have to occupy as a society, like as a global human race that's unified, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of unification things happening with the
Yeah.
evolution of religion,
Yeah.
right? So this unified um, human race, what do they need to believe in to organize themselves as such?
Oh, you cooking, bro. Hey, let me throw some spice on that. All
Mm.
right, let me adapt the question. Should we worship the religion of our colonizers, or create a new one? And you kind of mentioned how over religion evolved with the evolution of civilization, right? And we're at the point in which, as a civilized world, there is, as Nietzsche said, God is dead. And because God is dead, we have become our own creators in the sense. We dominate the world. We go anywhere and we can build roads, cut down trees, build houses, and truly, we can even change the DNA of different animals now. We can clone them. We can be able to splice in using CRISPR different DNAs to different animals. Like, we are playing God. And because of that, on top of that, there's a social concept which you brought in, which is beautiful, which is the concept that religions also helped organize people. As we moved from a small village to villages and a consortium of villages, and then from those villages we moved into like larger, basically camps of multiple villages. We ended up with an empire and a kingdom, then empires. Then you needed a structure to organize people, and people needed to believe in that structure of organization almost with a religious fervor. It is why, like, taxations and don't eat this versus this, those are rules that almost govern people. They govern people. And so, as we move on from, like, okay, my country versus your country, then maybe we'll even get to a point where we're like, this continent versus that continent, right? America and Canada unite into a North American like country, right? South America, all of it unites into a South American country, except Brazil because they speak Portuguese. I'm fucking around. It's a joke, Jesus.
It's just a dichotomy.
Right,
It's
and
just one way of thinking versus the other.
yeah, right. Think of the Americans versus the Chinese. It is one
I
way of
guess it's
thinking.
kind of like that now, where we have democratic nations versus the other, like
The other ones who are not democratic,
Yeah.
communist, like ways of organizing people.
Mhm.
There was also a separation in the past between state and religion. This happened around the time of the Enlightenment period because there was thinkers who both had to be part of like religion in a sense. Galileo, there was another one, Copernicus, who had to they had to recant that the earth the moon the sun doesn't go around the earth. Actually, the earth goes around the sun, which was against what the dominant time of like religion was like talking about. And then there was like as we evolved into science and logic more, there was started having to exist a separation between state organizing
Let's
people.
think of the word nihilism.
Nihilism.
Become nihilistic.
Yeah, so that you're just like, ugh, the world is nothing matters.
Right.
It really brick. But during the Enlightenment, there started being a separation between organizing people, logically setting up systems and structures of control to be able to move resources from one place to another for the advancement of the society itself, versus the rituals of how to keep people organized mentally, spiritually, and emotionally in their day-to-day lives, right? Because there's the economic aspect of what people do. My parents go to work, we go to work from Monday to Friday, and this spiritual aspect where they feel like, okay, I'm done with work now, I need to do something else other than work. If you think about work as the state and the government, the organization of people and resources towards the production of value and exchange of that value between the society and between other societies, versus the antithesis of that, where you're not working, but what are you doing then? You're living and existing. And in that, people sometimes they need something to believe in more. More than just like, damn, man, my life is just to wake up, go to this job, and do that and die. They need to know that their life matters in a grander
Right.
scheme of
It is a
things.
search for meaning.
It is a search for meaning. And I think that's what religion also gives them. It gives
So
them.
you did ask the provocative question of like, do we make a new one? What does a new one look like?
That was a good one. I'm glad you brought that up because I think I went down a rabbit hole there. But you brought up a concept in which, as we evolve from like now we're in a like nationalistic way of looking at society, right? Our nation versus your nation, and then our nation has it's part of a larger consortium of nations who share the same underlying belief structures, and those
Economic.
nations, right, basically,
Yeah.
versus NATO versus Russians and Chinese, right, and Indians maybe. And in that regard, right, what comes after that, I think, is almost similar to what the culture was. Remember the culture series? The culture series had some few tenets. And I think those tenets provided the morality, the moral structure of the like. If
It's a religion of humanism.
you know what I kind of think? It's going back to state and religion, because here, weird concept here, but religion not in the sense of that we're worshiping deities, god, like personified gods with their attributes. We have grown in the understanding of ourselves as people, but also in ourselves as a collective, to the point that we even have enough AIs and enough assistants to be able to help you grow yourself spiritually and economically, whatever, right? But the point is that I'm trying to kind of conceptualize here because I didn't even think about this until you brought it up, and then I realized, well, we just go with fundamental human rights as a concept of, hey, don't steal, don't do this,
It
like
feels like that's what the Americas was kind of born from, like the United States.
the Bill of Rights and like the fundamental truths, like as a
Yeah,
human.
where it felt like they were kind of creating this new age religion
Mm-hmm.
where we
Except for the
understand
black
there's
people.
un-
Inalienable rights.
unalienable rights given by God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like providence, as they call it. Like they had this concept of like, listen, we don't know what, we can't say that the religion of this group or that group and how you've fixed your pantheon and divine instruments or whatever work, or if they're real or not. But there, we'll just say that there is a God, period, right? Generally, and he's made us all equal, and we have to now establish. It's just that age of enlightenment
I mean,
period.
I'm smiling just because I like that concept
Mm.
way more.
It is
It's a
really
good
interesting.
concept. Let me just add to this.
Mm.
Would that then make the American like constitution, government, the systems of thought about Americanism a religion? If you think about the forefathers, they're holy prophets whose words are divine. And for you to say anything bad about our goddamn great forefathers, you are blasphemous, and we shall burn you at the stake or shoot you on the street.
You must
Whichever
believe in the
way.
letter of the scroll.
Basically.
Our
But,
Bill of Rights and our
right? Because
amendments
the
and
Constitution is so powerful in
but that's
America.
what they were, it's interesting that they were ahead of their time, and you think about these thinkers in that time, like was it John Locke, and the Enlightenment period, where they're shaking off the ideas of,
Cook it.
yeah. So these thinkers during the Enlightenment period are really trying now, like this is when Protestantism is happening. People are breaking away from the church, and this whole control structure that was established during the Dark Ages for millennia is now breaking down, and people are starting to be like, why do I have to be forced? Like it was literally like you had to go to church,
Mm-hmm.
or you would be like you would face some kind of state penalty,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you see in the US they start, changing that as like freedom religion. Like we're not going to be going that way, and we just are interested in the, you can believe what you want to believe, but you can't infringe. We can have basic human rights, and we're going to establish ourselves and organize ourselves. And I remember in class, I had learned that the philosophy of these guys at the time, they believed in God as like a clock maker, like somebody who's created the universe and set it to work and left it alone. He's not really involved in whatever goes down, but so it's our responsibility to organize ourselves and make it what it is. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? Where he doesn't have like an opinion of right or wrong
Mm-hmm.
or this or that. We have to establish that for ourselves. And it feels like when you look at the Constitution, when you look at the tenets of the French Revolution and everything that was going on, that was kind of how it went. But then there was like the backlash
Mm-hmm.
of religion that came back,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a balance, and people are not kind of
There's a
ready
dance
for it.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah, people weren't entirely ready for this kind of like crazy shift in how society was done yet. And so we come to the 60s, and kind of a similar
The
thing happens, the
counterculture, yeah.
counterculture, and people are getting back into it. We're having a discussion about like, did y'all mean what y'all said? You can't
Yeah.
be just treating black people and
Bro, that's 200 years later.
yeah, and
That's ironic.
it's really interesting how it takes that kind of time. And so when I look at a new religion going forward, I it feels like it's kind of, because it happened to monotheism too. You think about the Zoroastrianism, and even in Egypt, there was a point where like one pharaoh was like, "Hey, there's one God," and
Sun God.
yeah, there was he tried to set it up that way, and then the people were like, no, what? There's like 16 of them. Niggas like, shut up. And then they went back to that shit for some time, and then it took like I don't know, another half a millennia before we finally get to it was okay, monotheism is going to be the dominant way that we see the world now, right? And
You know why? Because everybody else who believes that religion has to die. Like over time, they just have to die. That way of thought, that way of thought has to cease to exist for there to exist a new way of thought.
because they live in that world,
And they can't detach from it. I can't. It's impossible for somebody in their 40s and 50s. Not impossible, but like if I'm comparing it to my parents, I can't tell my parents not to follow Christianity. It is their reality model is built entirely on the concepts within that book. That to tell them to shake that off.
what if flat Earth was the real thing? Wouldn't that be crazy? Could you just switch? Because it's like you're believing, the heliocentric model and the flat Earth model, right? I just live life and I have this idea of the moon is out here and the sun's over there and Jupiter's blah blah. And I've never seen it with my own eyes, but I've been given this model, right? And so this is how I live my life. For somebody to just suddenly be like, and you don't believe it 100%, and they just mandate it now, you know what I'm saying? Hey, we flat now. It's flat. You'd be like, fuck you. Like, you know what I'm saying? If he said, you want to believe this pillar is holding up the shit and it's a firmament and the sun is like this? Like, shut up. Like, it sounds super dumb. So, like, I wonder sometimes when people in religion, because I remember when I was, like, really into it, like, it felt that real. You know what I'm saying?
Damn.
Like, it felt like there was
Real,
entities
like,
around all the time. Or
you couldn't like think. You know the thing you
somebody's
said was
watching me and is gonna judge me or
you,
gonna
like,
like
you're
get
gonna burn or die.
yeah
The other thing is that you couldn't think certain thoughts.
yeah that too
That's I think that's really the most important part. It is the self-preservation, like concepts, algorithms within religions and how it preserves the thought process of itself in your mind.
I was gonna ask you about Dune actually because
I wanted to bring up Dune.
next to culture I think I've been researching Dune a lot more and more and especially the religion aspect and it touches a lot on Muslims and I'd love to say this for we have to talk to the Lethal Introspection guys and
check out that channel
and do a full breakdown of that. But as far as they said that Dune is not supposed to be set in a different world than us. This is just supposed to be our future. Isn't that crazy? Dune is supposed to be the same history that we have, but set in the future. And this is what was his name?
Paul Atreides?
No, the author.
Dan Herbert?
Hubert? Harriet? I don't know.
It's terrible that we don't remember his name, but yeah, keep going.
This was his vision of how future religion would work. And I thought it was so interesting that, like, how are these guys, right?
I'm mad, bro, because you know that in Christianity there is the concept of a Jesus coming back, and that Jesus will provide people.
But then there's the people who are outside, and we get the perspective of the people who are just using these myths, the Bene Gesserit.
Yep.
How I'm not completely into the lore. Maybe you know more about it. Like when it comes to the ruling houses, did they follow religion?
No, I don't think they did. The people in power. I'm just trying to find his name. The people in power didn't seem to care about it. Like, remember how Paul and his family and his dad were? They ruled. They didn't think about it as in like, oh, hey, we have to like. Religion was a tool of control for them. It was more of like how any ruling class would look at it. You play. How do I even put this? If I was in power, I would wear the ornaments of religion. I would wear religion as an outfit to go out there and to act pious, to play the part so that the populace can be inspired enough about it to continue being in the loops of life so that they don't change anything. If whether I believe
And
it
it
or
was so
not.
fascinating because like even though in the the world of Dune that we know this secret, and we know that the Bene Gesserit actually had planted this
His
myth.
first name, Frank Herbert.
Herbert.
Frank.
And so the fact that we like I was it was puzzling me all week because when I would talk to my mom, she has a visceral reaction if I even question, like, hey,
Jesus.
like I think that Christianity's kind of erased our culture as Kisi people. Like you don't even want to be, and that's something we could have touched on more. Is just like, dang, the one con is that it erases culture, right?
Existing cultures.
Yeah,
To
so
homogenize yourself with a dominant
because I
culture.
try to show her like, hey, this is how our people look. This is what they were doing, and they had some piercings. They looked like they were African tribe, like they look like tribesmen, like our Maasai neighbors and everything. So they was like, no, we weren't like that. We were never. No. We don't do
Those
that.
heathens?
We don't do that heathen stuff.
Those
Yeah.
uncultured animals?
And I feel like there's that's why the language thing makes me feel like that. There's a sense of like this
Yeah.
self-loathing and self-hate.
Yeah. I tried to say that in the video. Remember,
Yeah.
I was like, man, because I don't see people in my religion, because I don't see people in history who look like me, who have invented amazing things. I feel a sense of inadequacy, a sense of like, can I really do something great?
Right.
If there's no one else who's done great, like, yeah, there's black people who have done some great things, but there's pockets of them. Like, they are trickles compared to the vast amounts of, like, white people I read about who have
For
done
what
great
we're
things.
told.
Right?
Yeah. And
From what we're told.
yeah, so the more like it just feels like she didn't want to see herself like that, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's
the
interesting.
connecting, and where I was, because I'm out of it, and before I was, it's true, like you wouldn't want to be associated with backwards culture.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? It's like no. We're good Christian, English speaking, school going tribe. You know what I'm saying?
Good
And think
people.
about like
We're
how
good.
Kenya is now. Like we wear fucking wigs to court. Oh, it's so like repulsive to me. Like why would we do that? The herd isn't even like that. You came on and put a white man wig on to be in court. Like it feels like it makes me feel like, dang, we think so lowly of ourselves that we have to fashion ourselves in the image of our conquerors to feel legitimate. And that's like a good
That's cold. Can you say that again?
and that is a
Hey,
strong
say that
argument.
again, bro. Hey, you gotta say that one more time, bro. That was cold.
And I guess to your point, they'll get on the replays. I don't even remember. To your point too, like when we're talking about do we continue to worship this and follow these trends into the future in Africa? And I said, if it's useful, and if there's a way that it's not useful, or if you wanted to abandon it, and like we need a new vision that it does include us and does put ourselves in a. And I was talking to some other people about this. And I was just like, let's focus on getting empowered first and then rewrite the history, because apparently that's what everybody does.
Yep.
Right? First empower yourself. But when you're there, then rewrite put yourself in the thing, because clearly white people did. They're like, what's the religion? Jews and those sand people? Nah. Jesus was white.
Right?
He looked like this, and he had blue eyes and
long blonde hair.
yeah,
bro.
he got birdman hair. He was like, No, none of this. Don't give him a Muslim beard like how they look.
Nah, bro.
He had
He's far from those heathens, those sand people, those uncultured worm-like people.
he looked like a Nordic.
Yep. Italian Roman
Thor.
kind of thing, honestly, because he doesn't look barbaric like the who are the people who like destroyed Rome or Visigoths. He doesn't look like what a Visigoth would look like or an Anglo-Saxon. He looks more pristine, Roman. Like I don't know how to put it. When I see the symbols and the cross and the like all that,
Just put them overwrote
imagery
themselves
of
over it.
yeah, dude, it's like. But the ironic thing, I can't escape the influence of Christianity in me and in my life. I grew up hearing of this nigga who was so cold that he died for other people's sins, and he's gonna come back, and he's going to build heaven on earth, and he's gonna provide us a place where we don't have to work for food, and we can for eternity be free. And you know what's ironic about that? I see my parents, I see everybody in my life as I'm growing up looking and aspiring to this man and this God, sorry. And I think, damn, man, I wish my own parents, I wish my own people would be proud of me like that. Why do you think automating the production and distribution of basic needs is even a thing in the lexicon of my vision? Why do you think terraforming the desert and doing all that? It's because a subconscious part of me not only wants to be loved and to be able to have my life matter. I didn't matter. I grew up with no one. I grew up with nothing. I grew up alone, and I lack self-esteem for that. I cannot even appreciate that I've done so many of these things in my life. So for me, the only way that I can be worthy of people's love is if I aspire to be something so great and undeniably great that they cannot deny. He is great. Have you seen what he did? He gave us
It's really
free food.
fascinating. Like when you think about Jesus,
Yeah.
the story is that he came from nothing, right? So he's a let's look at it on its face without any kind of divine reading of it. It's like this is an illegitimate son.
Oh God, you're getting canceled in this one.
But I mean, from that,
It wasn't from Joseph.
but from your feeling, I just had that connection. It's like, man, I wonder if Jesus felt like this. He's like, man, I gotta be this kind of person, because he felt so inadequate when he started out. You know what I'm saying? And he's illegitimate. He gets born in Nazareth, and everybody says nothing good comes from Nazareth, and just from this downtrodden and just lowly place, right? To then fashioning himself as the Messiah of the age of the race.
Yep. From that backwater tribe.
Right.
You
Coming
from there?
and everybody and then lifting himself. It really is an aspirational story for anybody who comes from nothing. And I see how you can really like connect and want to be like that and be that symbol, right?
Can I also add on to that? Paul Atreides was the same. He lost everything, then he went to the Fremen, and then the Fremen had already had. That's why the book and everything about Dune is kind of interesting, because the Bene Gesserits had already laid the groundwork of a Messiah. In Christianity, they exist in our own people. You always tell me this when I bring this up. You're like, bro, think about it this way. They've already set up the structures. Why not use them? Right? If you think about it from the Bene Gesserit perspective, yes, they're already expecting a Messiah.
The structure. Yeah.
They're already expecting a Messiah who's going to come save them and give them a place to stay where they have no war, no violence, and they're going to beat everybody else who subjugated them and treated them like shit.
That was what the Jews expected.
But now it's Africans. I'm not a Jew. I'm like, bro, the Jews is up. they can't go back.
That was the original expectation of what Jesus was supposed to do, and that's why a lot of the disciples in the Bible were like, hey, so I'm gonna be like what, like prime minister,
right.
Or like where am I gonna be like, hey,
Minister
he's
of
the
Finance.
king, so yeah, like make sure you break us off with your boys, right?
Hey man, we've been since day one, bro.
Day ones, and we ruled
from nothing, bro.
But how we gonna take these Romans out? Because they thought he was gonna do that kind of revolution.
Yeah, but
So
he didn't. But he
But the it's interesting because the Dune story is more about the Muslims, and it's funny because the Muslims do consider Jesus as the Messiah as well,
Mm-hmm.
and they see like what Paul's role in in the story is actually of somebody called Ma- Ma- the Mahdi.
Muad'Dib.
They
They
have a
have a
similar
similar,
word,
yeah.
and he's supposed to pave the way. He's supposed to be the offense. I mean, the defense. He's supposed to protect
Mm-hmm.
the Muslims while Jesus comes back and then goes on the offense to take over the world for
For the
to
greater good
finish the
of
jihad.
Muslim. Yeah.
So it is fascinating. Um, but yeah, I feel like I got off of where I was going. Oh yeah, when I talked to my mom about this stuff, and she's just kind of not very receptive to it, and it feels like she's just like it's become this control thing where we can't even it's erased us, and I've been feeling more and more like dang, when I was part of like hook line and sinker in the same world that she lived in and didn't question anything, I felt kind of like ashamed about who I was and where I came from,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I can't deny
Same.
that. Whereas just like, dang, we have no place in the Bible, and we also have no um, like like sure and I told you there's black people in the Bible, but Africa's not a monolith,
Mm-mm.
right? Ethiopians aren't us, right?
Mm-mm.
If we're talking about Punt and all these people, Kushites, those are different people and they have a different culture and they're not necessarily us,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we're talking about like Bantu
Mm-hmm.
tribes, and then it's like, dang, we're nowhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I always used to ask my parents like, how does a Chinese person feel about how does a Korean, and there's the major religion in Korea is Christianity. And that always blows my mind because they are definitely nowhere to be found. You know what I'm saying? Like y'all are
Yep.
not even around the area, and y'all were doing your own thing, and I guess God forgot about y'all out there. He didn't care what y'all. So
You guys don't even show up in
you
that.
don't even show up at all, right? So I always felt like, dang, that's crazy. Um, but yeah, that's the downside is just like this erasure
Of
and
culture and control over the mind.
the
The
mind.
control
Yeah.
over, like, we can't notice this deeply about Africa and just Africans and how we think. The conception of the future for us isn't rooted in our own ability to create it. It is rooted in the ability of something external of us saving us. Thus, we are reliant upon external foreign powers to help us. Fundamentally, if you think about it, Chinese don't expect a Chinese Jesus or a Chinese concept of Jesus to come save them. They are Chinese and they will build a great China because that is what they would do because they've done it before. They can look back in their history and be like, we used to be great back here, we can be great in the future because we are the ones who created that. Indians are similar, right? Indians can look and they have their own religion, they have their own culture. They know the sense of self is so strong within these Japanese are the same,
Mm-hmm.
right? These people can look back and be like, we were great here. We, as pockets of black people who had maybe civilizations that were great, don't even have a stronger sense and connection to those civilizations.
So we're co-opting everybody else's, and
Right?
especially black people in the U.S. is like, I'm like my head is now spinning at all the claims, and I'm just like, you know, somebody like Kanye comes out and saying we're the true Israelites, and I'm like, okay, maybe, um,
I
might
can't.
be there is some evidence.
I just, look, at some point, I'm just like, look, we're just gonna say this. We lost. We just lost. Like, just be honest.
I'll just
Just,
say this, like to finish my statement. There is some truth to that. There is an Igbo tribe that they have done DNA testing and found that okay, these people are Jews, right? And
what does that even mean?
but this is that wasn't where I'm gonna stop.
Okay.
And then later, they're like, oh, but we were also the Moors. I'm like, but the Moors were slaving. All right, so Moor means black. Okay, I can see how you. Okay, so y'all were the Muslims because you can't be the Muslims and the Jews. So which one? And but this I'm always talking about African Americans. So they're like, okay, we were Moors. No, we were Jews. All right, so there's black Israelites, black Moors, and I'm like, y'all came all on the same ships. It's like, no, 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 no. We didn't come on no ships. We was already here. So I'm like, y'all the Native Americans? Yeah, and we're the Irish. I was like, oh my God. I was like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Okay.
it's been too many. How is all this like, yeah, it's this conspiracy and they don't want us to this like so because they didn't tell you, now you could claim to be anything because then I saw like a girl on TikTok. She had very Asian features. She's black, but she has very Asian features, and some black people could look like that, right? And someone in the comments was like, "I knew it was the Chinese." I was like, "Yo, we gotta stop this.
Oh
We
man,
gotta stop this." Bro, it's
Hey
like y'all
man.
want to be everything except black.
Yeah,
That's
if you
crazy.
don't know where you stand, you'll fall for anything. Like, bro, the thing about that I was gonna say is like, it's just too complicated for me, and I just can't figure it out. Nor do I can't not only can I not figure it out, I don't have the time or the effort to put into figuring out which of the past previous people who got colonized
Mm.
we all lost. As a black person, we lost for thousands of years. Like I can pick and choose. I do want to like because you do a lot more research about Kisis, and I do like how you brought up like when I used to like read the Bible and when I used to go in world history and study history, there was a I didn't have a sense of like, oh, our people are cool, we did cool things, I can do cool things. It was just out of like, nah, bro, we are all backwater enslaved people who got colonized and massacred, and now we are just at the bottom. And I need to be something better. And so it was just out of a sense of like egoism where I was like, well, I wasn't drawing from anything in the past in a connection with a larger historical context. It was just like, nah, I have to be something great because I have to do it. But as I talk to you and as you're researching and going through all that you research and go through and learn, it connects back to a trend in history where I'm like, oh, so maybe I'm not entirely different, or like it legitimizes me and my feelings in a sense because I feel like, okay, maybe then I'm not as crazy as like Otenya was, right? Otenya was crazy and he was out here like fighting against the
Crazy.
British, right? Not crazy, crazy from the perspective of like white people where he's like, damn, this nigga is crazy. He almost took me out with a spear. My nigga, we had guns. And that nigga rode in. Bullets firing and we was missing the nigga. And you know what he does? Chucks a goddamn spear at me and almost offs me. We gonna murder every mother, child, and man in this village until you give up this nigga. Now where is he? Right? And so you tell me these stories, and I'm like, dude, that sense of bravery, like, it gives me historical context where I can place myself within. But when what was it that you said where I was like, oh, it just feels that all this back and forth about like who we were, where we used to be, how we
We was
got here,
kings.
you know, it just feels like it's another like
Trap.
musical chair charades where we're going back and forth about like, oh, here's who we used to be, and we're spending so much time trying to figure out who we used to be instead of who we're going to be. Thus, we're missing the point. We need to be something in the future. What are we going to be? And are we just gonna be some niggas who go
you
back and
need
forth?
you need a legitimizing myth, and that's where I'm just
The
like,
American myth. Remember, I was smiling about the
mhm.
American myth. America is a new country that was created from myth. Like at the very beginning, was it Rufus? There was somebody who I read, and he was like, at the very beginning, they had a hard time because they had a hard time in that they had to legitimize the concept of this new nation, and thus it is almost why the American concept of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is so its undertones has religious like fervor within it, right?
And it's very unique for it's like probably just the US and Haiti maybe, because all the other ones they declared independence, but not really. Like a lot, especially like the British colonies, even to this day they're part of the Commonwealth. You know, their head
Yeah.
of state, even Australia, is their true head of state is the Queen. Well, now the King. So what do we make of that? You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, it's what did they say? It's only ceremonial. It's like, I don't believe that for a second. I think they still wield a lot of influence and power. So
And even if it is ceremonial, why keep that ceremony?
right, it feels
Isn't it to another nation? Aren't you paying tribute and tithe to another nation?
right. Why
Why
was
not your own?
it felt like
It's like,
maybe at the time though, and the need to be legitimate is so important. So they could always say like, oh, this person was appointed by the king, or he's been confirmed by, you voted them in and then they're confirmed by the king or something like that, right? And there's a legitimacy in the same way that like the Pope used to do this for kings, right? That he legitimized coronation. So it feels like something like that. So like the United States being able to set it up on their own kind of
terms and
terms.
stand on business, bro, and just be like, we are this.
We the people.
We defined, yeah, we the people.
We the people.
We are the
So-
populace, but we're not really the populace.
It
We're
really
just
made me-
representatives of the populace.
And when Dr. Rufus Fears like talked about it, I felt like really like inspired by it, you know, especially when he told the story of its founding and everything. I was like, dang, I feel patriotic. Like,
Yep. He has such a good way of romanticizing history.
right,
And
definitely.
telling it. And like Dr. Fears
Like, I want to
Rufus,
be a part of this.
I'm glad you actually showed him to me, because he
Yeah.
made me love history in the sense that it is good just to know about it, just because you can then be able to draw inspiration from it, right? It allows you to also see how the consequences of the stories we tell ourselves about the past lead us to the present we are. Because it is in the picking and choosing of what stories to continuously tell does it build a natural sense of like connection to the past. We connect to the past based on the stories that we pick to tell and to choose. If we forget a part of the past, then we do lose that essence of ourself within the past. That's why Africans don't have as strong of a sense of self, because we can't connect to a past previous sense of self. You are right. Think of the Attack on Titan, and how I always say, like, we'll eventually just have to write a new story and say, okay, from here moving forward, this is who we are.
Yeah.
Because at that point, then, like, going back and saying, oh, we used to be the Jews, we used to be this, we used to be, like, okay,
Is
you
it
can
too
still be
late?
that.
Is it too late? Because
It's been thousands of years.
the thing about Christianity is that now it has so much legitimacy, right? Because it's been around for so long, where when you brought it to some backwater natives, aborigines of some place, they don't have the internet to be like, you know, if they don't know if you just made this shit up right now. You
Yeah.
know, you could tell
Yeah.
over thousands of years and blah blah blah. So now, like, setting this thing up is a lot harder because they're like, what's this new thing you trying to get us? It's like some African, like, blah blah. And so there's not a lot of like,
Can I?
there it could be done,
Can I
but
tell
maybe
you?
it's a
You
little.
actually gave me the keys way, way long ago. You said, in the marketplace of ideas, let the best one rise to the top.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to convert. You don't have to convince people. You just show them, this is the new concept. This is the concept I'm working towards. It is up to you to choose whether you want to follow it or not. Does having this world model make you put you at a better social standing? Does it give you more value? Do you make more money? Are you happier because of this concept, or are you not? And it's not rational. Like, I'm thinking about it from a rational perspective in terms of people being economic creatures that make rational decisions of the pros and cons of what they choose to believe in. Most people are not like that. Most people sometimes just choose to go with the feeling of it. And at the very beginning, you don't even need millions of people. Jesus started with 12. He only started with a few 12 people who were the strongest believers of him, and went ahead to convert many, many people. and spread the word, and that's how the law is written. But maybe the law isn't written like that, in a way that you miss elements of it. When he goes to the mountain and converts two fish into unlimited fish and bread, you think all those people who ate and experienced that miracle of free food, do you think they didn't go and spread the word? As much as it was the 12 disciples being anchors of the 12 pillars that the church of Jesus was built upon, there were still other people who engaged in conversations about this new character called Jesus. And within those conversations, the lore of Jesus spread. And it spread far and wide. And eventually, it became strong enough that he was known by so many people. And I don't think that if you are going to build something recent and new like this, will you come out and say, oh, well, here's the new doctrine and here's how I'm launching it. No, you place it in a way that it allows people to feel connected to it, in a sense that they can relate to it on a emotional level, and then they can be able to rationalize it for themselves logically on why they choose to. And it will take time for them to be able to get into feeling that this is okay. They'll have to get over some previous ideas. So you're not going to convert the hardcore Christian believers first. Sure as hell not. You're going to start with the outskirts of the people who are like, man, I don't, this is not for me, I'm not feeling it, but there's nothing else around that's better than this. You know what? I'm a black Israelite Jew. That's what I'm going with.
I was toying with the idea in my head, and at first I was like, but at first the idea came to my head is like, but usually religion was spread on the tip of a sword, right? You conquer, and then now this is the religion. And a lot of times it was like that. You destroy people's idols and books and stuff like that, and you force them into your program, right? Especially in the ancient world. But then I had to reconsider and be like, these days, religions spring up all the time, right? Now, the extent to which they end up having significant influence. Some are more successful than others, and maybe you can study something like a Scientology. Like, how does Scientology, with its out of the like ballpark, like that was out of left, you know what I'm saying? There's nothing really related, at least from what I know, because I hear things about Xenu and stuff like that, and I really need to go dive in and see what they actually believe one of these days, because I know there's space involved and aliens and
I wonder if
all
it's
this
just
stuff.
the outward dressing of it. Like, once you get into it, like, they actually tell you now, this is actually really why we do that, so that it keeps out the certain people. Like, there's the outer appearance of it, and then there's the inner workings of it. And
It's
I
like a
think,
secret society.
yeah, and I think in the inner workings of it, like, think about it. There's the outward working of Christianity, going to church, doing the doctrine, and following that. But there's the inner workings of the organization that perpetuates the books, the studies, the legitimization of different churches. Why is our church called the Seventh Day Adventists versus something else? Why didn't they choose Lutheranism or something else like that? And even if they were to choose Lutheranism, there's an organization that legitimizes your congregation of people as the Lutherans, right? Because you have to be able to follow these doctrines. I kind of think that there's a part of it where there's the inner workings of how these religions work in terms of the power structures within the people who decide what goes where and how it goes there, that is that a lot of people miss by being on the outward of it, following the rituals of the religion. Think about it. Our parents are not in the power structure that is the SDA organization that sends out the books, that does the camps, and like the tithes that they're sending to. They're sending those tithes to an organization. That organization does something with that money, evangelism or some other things like that, right? And that inner working of that organization is what I'm more interested in than the superficial aspects of the ritualistic nature of how people practice the religion. There is the practice of religion from the peasant, from the, damn it, I didn't have a better word other than peasant, but it was just that from the outside, from the person on the ground, right?
Man.
Common man, like myself. I am also a peasant. I am one of you, so don't stone me to death. I merely ask questions. But from that perspective, there's the person like myself on the ground who's indoctrinated into these religions, but I'm not the one who comes up with the indoctrination routines, the systems and the structures of belief that then we farm out to people like me to follow, right? There's the outward of it, the sign, like think of Scientology. There's the things people outside of Scientology understand. There's the people who practice Scientology understand, and there's the people who organize Scientology understand. Those three levels of understanding are entirely different. So if we sit out here and we're like, here's what I think about Christianity. Should you follow it? Should you not? It's a personal choice. You decide whether what you want to or not. That, for me, puts the power back into the person's hand, and I'm like, hey, go research it. Go learn about the tenets and principles of this, and does it create the effect in your life that you wish to have? Or does it not? Is it empowering you or is it not, right? Because I can go with the Christian myth and just run with it and just say, okay, hey, I'm a firm believer in Christianity. I am the hardest believer of Christianity. And I had a vision once that we should terraform the Sahara Desert because that's where we're going to build God's kingdom, heaven on earth. And we're going to be able to use robots to make food free for everybody. I'm no one. I'm a nobody. But I had a vision once. God called me, and this is what I am chosen to do. And I will go to church and I will talk about it in intercessory prayer. And I climb the ladder of the KCC. And then from there, I'll go to the conference. And then I'll espouse my same beliefs about the vision once God told me. And they're already fervent enough. And they already believe in their thing enough. And they already, the seeds of a Messiah have already been laid. And if it makes logical sense that we can use AI to automate the production and distribution of basic needs to create a heaven on earth, then why wouldn't I just do that? The seeds have been laid. It doesn't say that Jesus can't be black, does it? And if he can't be black, then I can bring the political aspect to it. Like, man, I went to the conference and these niggas was just hating. So my followers, I am starting a new religion. Africa Christian 2.0.
They do it all the time, man. It's crazy. There's somebody who claims to be Jesus in Kenya right now. I don't know if you saw those videos.
Oh God.
Yeah.
How is he gonna build heaven on earth? He got Mexican
He's got
country?
new disciples and stuff.
Word.
Yeah.
Shit, I might just meet with him.
He's really funny.
I think I might inspire him a bit.
Yeah, he's like, I was just in class one day and I realized I'm Jesus. I don't know. It was really interesting. But how about we conclude this question? Should we worship the religions of our colonizers? Where do you land on this finally? What's your final words? Yes or no? And why?
I can only make that a personal choice. Should we, as a collective, I don't think it's time for us to
Africans,
decide.
right? Or
as Africans, Africans, colonized Africans by Christians and like English people, because I can't speak on Islam and Muslims because I don't know that religion good enough. But should we, as Christians who were colonized by the British, continuously follow the religion of our colonizers into the foreseeable 100,000 years into the future? I think as a collective, we should pick and choose the parts of it that work for our societies and leave the rest without being indoctrinated into just think like. Part of me says no. Honestly, if I wasn't to pick a politically correct answer, I would just say no. I would just say no. We should create our own religion and let it be rooted in Afrofuturism, in which we have become self-sufficient enough to decide our own future and how to save ourselves, rather than expecting someone else to come and save us. And I think there's more power and strength within that. And if I was to say something that I truly believe, is no. We shouldn't, because it doesn't serve us in a way that empowers us now. At some point in the future, we'll have to decide to save ourselves, then be saved by some external entity, and rise up to be similar to civilization like the Chinese or the Indians or the Japanese, who believe in their own homegrown concepts than the imported concepts of the people who they were colonized and dominated by. That's what I would say. The non-politically correct answer. The politically correct answer is we can vote on it. What do you think?
From a personal perspective, I don't think anybody should worship religion. I don't. I mean, yeah, worship the religions. Can you worship the religion? I don't know if that's the
worship the religions of our colonizers. So it's the religions of the colonizers. So it's not
you worship the God of the religions, right? So because the religion's a practice. Anyways,
right.
Semantics. Either way, personally, I would say like nobody should. I don't like the idea of religion at all because it's just a matrix concept that I feel is just rooted in control.
What do you mean by that?
Um, it's just from everything I've said, I've kind of brought up a lot of examples where I've just been like, yeah, people used it this way to organize society, right? To
It's a
establish rules,
system of
and it's a
control
system of control
and
when it comes
governance.
to religion. And it's I'm like forcing you to do certain things, like not forcing. I'm like making you think
Coercing
that
you.
you need to do
If
it
you don't
for
do it, you won't be saved.
right.
You
So
will
you
die.
save your soul, like have the eternal
Okay.
power over it. Not me, but this is what the book says. So, and I feel like that is it's just so annoying to me sometimes when I just watch people and they just like my mom the other day. I'm like, hey mom, I can go take your car and get a car wash today, and it's like, oh wait, it's a Sabbath. I don't want you to do that. I'm like, Mom, I'm watching you clean the kitchen right now. Isn't that also work? You know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like, what are we doing? This,
At what point do
you
you draw
look,
the line?
it seems stupid to you. Like, we're just looking stupid.
It's the eternal dance.
Of like, oh, what are we even doing? And as a person who is a very a life path of 7, I don't like illogical things. As a Spock, those things frustrate me. So it's
Yeah.
like, can we be consistent in our beliefs? So that inconsistency, it just seems kind of like this is something that holds us back
Hmm.
as like truly like being not NPCs and
Right.
being true.
Like be spiritually aware, not religious aware. Like
Yeah,
don't
that's
do.
where because I believe in God, and I feel like that to know God is something that a book can't tell you. It has to be a real internal um, relationship and journey for yourself to really like know God and like
Hmm.
have that true experience. And everything else is like I agree with the religions of teachings that is like you shouldn't have idols, and that's like the biggest thing that I take from. If you want to know God, you can't have an idol. Like the Bible will be an idol, the religion will be an idol. It's just something you're putting in the way.
Understanding of it, and then
Yeah, you feel like you can do this, worship this thing, or do the things here so that you can get to God, but you'll never get to God through the thing because
yeah,
it's become
it's a
an
thing.
idol.
Yeah, it's
So, from that personal sense,
hmm.
I'm like, if we're really just talking about spirituality and God, I feel like religion actually takes people away from it. Now, from a state crafting,
Hmm.
of like a desire to see from a desire to see Africa rise up
And
and
reorganized, and yeah.
yeah, for a desire to see Africans have agency in the world stage and our nations to really organize and have some self-esteem and you know come up and have our own power,
Hmm.
from that perspective, no.
Right.
And if so, and if we must, then I think we need to rewrite it a
Right.
little. As everybody does.
Hey, tune in a bit better.
As everybody does, our Jesus is gonna be black, and everyone's like I feel like everybody
Let's
needs
start with
to.
that. Let's just make Jesus black.
I'm gonna, or we could do what Jews did. Like, let's take the thing, because I have a feeling and actually believe that the religion started a long time ago out of Africa, and then it gets co-opted by so many groups, and it's always the same story, and there's always the same archetypes, and everybody just refashions it where they're the middle.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, all right, if that works for you, it worked for me. Like, if this is what, but I also feel like to unite Africans and to bring people together, I like this idea of having a new way to believe that brings people together, that incorporates what is unique about our cultures
Hmm.
and our way of life, and the things are unique about Africa that are good about Africans, and puts
Hmm.
them in the central,
Hmm.
tenets.
Hmm.
So like I agree with the Pan Africanists. We kind of come up with something like Kwanzaa,
Hmm.
and you're building a new way
Hmm.
to bring in our culture and put us in a position of like not of tenant, like being a tenant of a religion, but being part of like this is our story, right? So I think that is really empowering. And even as much as like Christians and Muslims will be like, no, this is a religion for the world, subconsciously there's a inferiority. Even like when I look at like don't the Muslim community, please don't come for me. But I'm like, damn, how am I African speaking Islam? Like I'm speaking Arabic. Like we have to. Why do we have to read? Like it has to be done in Arabic. And like the Quran is like there. Everybody who reads the Quran, like they like start learning Arabic to learn the, and I actually respect that because that's kind of you learn the original word so it doesn't get bastardized. Because I feel
It's
like the Bible was,
it's clever though. Remember what you said
but
about
yeah,
language.
language. That's
Yep.
where that's my point to it. Where I'm like, dang, I feel like I'm being co-opted into.
A different
Now
world
I've
model.
become I've become a tenant of a different state of a different group of people, and now I'm in their like sphere of influence, and I've lost my agency because now I'm speaking their language, following their customs, following their rules, and all that stuff, and then I've kind of lost my agency in that sense, and because I'm African and because like this is the team I'm on, I'm born into this shit. There is a desire where I'm like, I do want to see myself and like, uh, you know, us be empowered in that way and not have to be okay with being like the servant. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Because like the fucking book, like I was looking at this the other day, I'm like, damn, so everybody thinks we're like the descendants of Ham, and we're supposed to be servants. Like you know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
well, y'all were cursed, and y'all was like the servants, so it was up. You know what I'm
Hey
saying? That's the look. How are
man.
we ever gonna like
We're
the
never gonna
book
be up.
literally says that, and now we have to worship this, and that's like, how would
You're
I ever be empowered? And if it's like this is what I have to
you want
believe.
power? No, you're a servant. Remember your place under my boot.
And like, and they don't even call us out. It's like the Bantu are never called out, and it's like I'll give you that. If we are gonna say we're Kushites or this or that, but the Bantu, if we're gonna say like we're Bantu or whatever, the Sub-Saharan, all of these people and my niggas in Korea, we is never called out. So I don't know how we part of the curse of Ham because y'all didn't even know we existed.
Bro, we're not even part of your story. Bro, I'm just a side character that doesn't even get a name. No extra, no name in the credits, bro. Like you
Right.
couldn't even throw me a bone,
You know
bro.
what? I actually agree with you. We aren't in the Bible because I've also been reading up on this concept. Is like, look, Africa is the most ancient place and the most ancient people in the
Bro,
world.
in their
Our
current story, in the current history of the world, the cradle of humanity is in East Africa, in like the Rift Valley Turkana area where they found the oldest fossil of Lucy, is what they called her. And that's where, in this modern narrative and history that we exist within, that's where they say that humans started.
and I say this to bring up the point that there is such an erasure in this new world of just erasing identities, even African identities, and we do it to ourselves too. And as much as I'm Pan African, because we've been pushed in this way of being like, damn, it's us versus them type of shit, because we're just being blanket oppressed. You know what I'm saying? I'll be treated just like a Nigerian, and Nigerian will be treated like a fucking Rwandese, and we're all gonna be fucked over whenever we go to these other countries, and we're just oppressed, right? So, in that sense, we have solidarity. But I'm Abagus. I'm Mogusi of Abagusi, and we have our own people of customs and everything, which is very different from what the Yoruba believe or the Hosa, and our languages are different. And there's so many people in Africa. You look at the different groups in Europe, and there's like you can name like 10 of them, and there's like big swaths of like here's 10 groups. And then in Africa, you're like, all right, I'm not counting that shit.
Yeah, no, bro. In
I'm not
Kenya,
counting
there's
that shit.
42
There's already 40 in Kenya. There's 100 something in Nigeria,
different
and
languages,
they're
different
all
cultures, different like tribes,
right.
history,
So,
religions, probably.
so there's so much erasure where people come up and say like, well, you stole your own brothers. It's like they were my brothers, bro. Like, first of all, my tribe is all the way over here. We didn't even know any of y'all existed until 100 years ago. We was not fucking with y'all, and these other motherfuckers in Nigeria and Ivory Coast and stuff like that, they were enemies. All right, like those are prisoners of war, and plus we didn't know y'all were gonna do that to them. Like we wasn't doing that to them here. We
That's
didn't
a
know
good
y'all were
point.
gonna dehumanize them. Our kind of slavery was not like
And not
that.
even just dehumanize them, create a culture around it that ended up affecting the homeland to then make everybody in the homeland subservient to the rest of all the other races. If you think about it, Chinese, I kind of mentioned this earlier, Chinese and Indians and like Russians and Japanese, they have a specific social standing in society because the places they come from are great in their own right. As much as we put down Russia, Russians are still great people because of where they come from is still a powerful, dominant place in the world where they are playing on the world stage. There's no cohesive African black world stage player. They just doesn't exist. There's them Chinese, them Indians, even the Mexicans play a place in the world that is better and higher than the concept of a black African group of people. Maybe you might say, like, what Indians are the closest colored, dark skinned people who are playing at that larger stage where they have nuclear weapons, where they can defend themselves. There's a billion plus of them, and they're all taken seriously. As much as people will say whatever about Indians, Indians are playing the game at that level. They're considerate, like they are considerate force to be reckoned with because of their people, their culture, their like when you look at India, you're like, all right, that's a lot of people. We
They
don't
have a
want
lot of
them.
different groups too, but
Yeah, that's also another thing about them. They're yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
they have been able to unify for the most part, and so like I brought up that more to just say like, when we talked about before that our black people in the Bible, not our black people, like not most of black people, because black people are not a monolith, and I feel like every time we get addressed as such, they erase us so much. Of like you black people, is like which ones? Like we have
Should
so
we
many
just
different types.
accept it and like just say, all right,
I think
we
at some
black
point,
people, we espouse these are our tenets of us black because you guys want to brand us together. Fine, we accept that brand. As this brand, this is what we choose to represent, and because we choose to represent these tenets
you brought
within,
that up in your other video where it's just like will Africa ever be united? It's just too many people, etc. And I was thinking about that too, and whoever told you that makes a great point. Now, this is not a new problem though, and you brought up the Alexander, and there is that sense
took
of
them by the
like
sword.
you might have to it might have to be like that.
But
You
the
know what
United
I'm saying?
States showed me a different path.
Did
We
they?
we talked about it and we were like the forefathers wrote this thing where they're like the Bill of Rights and it started off as a abstract concept and then you just throw it in with the natural ideas that exist and people who will because think about it there's social media now and there's all these like ways to get to pockets of reality in which people are and you can create online communities where the people who believe that come together fundamentally it's here conceptually here's how I would do it. I say, all right, let's all take this bowl and we're gonna put all our ideas that we want us as a group of people to represent, right? And then we'll mix it up. We'll have an LLM and an AI go through it, and then it'll create a doctrine, a manifesto, a constitution, a bill of rights, and then everybody put their shit in there, right? You'll have your section. It'll be a federation of concepts and ideas, but we'll all be. It's a super class of, hey, here's what we believe as a core tenet. Then you can have your culture and your religion as a subclass of that borrows from that, but still respects your religion and your way, your religion, your culture, your language.
I've been coming to a point where I feel like we talked about this before. Uh, I think like conquest is a net positive, and it's the battle of ideas fundamentally at some point here that just ends up winning at the top, and it's like maybe it's just military, um
That's a deep
might,
topic.
yeah,
We should
and
do,
I
should do a
think
video
I
about
think that's
that.
a different concept, but I just bring it, a different topic I did want to explore in another video,
Bro,
but
that's
I
such a
just
deep.
more bring it up because I'm like, yeah, that might work, but there's a point where somebody, and you've known this to be, as much as like, wait, this is you're not like this usually, but if you remember, go back, and I'm
Yeah, dude.
always like, I hate rule by committee. like like there's a
Yeah.
point where I agree with the Socrates or something, like, damn, the democracy is just too flawed to work because
Man, to go from
there
like.
I like the idea of a republic. I like the idea of the right people leading, because the common denominator of man is not who I want making decisions. And but
Yep.
some people, like you said, you brought this up, you know how that religion changes. Everybody who believed that, oh shit, had to die. And sometimes you assimilate or you die. I struggle to think about a situation in which a society, or because you think about a Russia had to conquer all of these Asians
Yep.
to be this huge country that spans two continents. China
Yep.
did the same. There's a lot of ethnic groups in China that they forced to be Chinese,
Yep.
and Japan also
Yep.
has a few different groups in there, even though they're mostly Japanese. But maybe there was other groups, bro, and they
And they
just got
assimilated.
assimilated. And yeah, we don't talk about Anglo Saxons anymore, and nobody cares about that. They're just, we're English, we're British.
British.
You know what I'm saying?
We're
We're not
French.
Celts. We're Irish and
French
Scottish.
and German, and they used to be,
At some
Prussia.
point, maybe we have to sacrifice the ego of
The smaller
wanting the
tribes.
self-preservation of.
I'll build a museum for y'all.
I
Y'all can
think,
come tell your stories. We'll preserve that and keep
yeah,
that. Or
but we have to go into the future, and this is not serving us anymore. So we just be like, all right, this
was
is
it ever serving us in modern history as
clearly we
we've thought about
survived.
it? Just hear me out. The pyramids were built by somebody. Like a civilization had to have built it. And if Africa is the cradle of civilization, we had so much time before modern history starts and even prehistory starts. You're telling me that there was the amount of resources it took to build those things, and even the prototypes of them, and the civilization that had to have existed for that to even exist. It's not even a conversation that there was a civilization that existed vast and great enough to build them. We just brush it all off and say it must have been the aliens. Obviously, I mean, how else could the pyramids have been existing? And
You
how
know,
it had to have even been like not just an African thing, because you have pyramids in Latin America, you have pyramids in Asia, and now I'm thinking, okay, look at how we are modern day. That we have all this shit going on all around the world. You think there was no point in the past where things could have just happened like that? For the hundreds of
yeah.
thousands of years humans have been around, there was not a point in which we advanced in tens of thousands of years and we're like, all right, we up now, and then we down now. And now that we're down,
You know, I think we miss a lot of the data, and we look at a pyramid. Let's look at any building here. There's probably a handful of people in this state that know how to build
a
the
skyscraper.
Fauché Tower. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And if they all die, all of these people are the equivalent of some people
Backwater.
backwater village, and
Bro.
it would devolve to that. You know what I'm saying? They wouldn't know how to put up an electric grid
Shit,
and
nah, bro.
know all the interworkings of, like, most people are
Generator and
dumb.
the nuclear
Like,
power
there's
plants.
just a few people at the top of society
Who know
who
that?
know how to organize us common people into a way that is a society. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good
So,
point.
if
Like,
you lose a few of them, or if some catastrophe happens, or you get conquered and they just kill all of your most able people,
all your top smartest people, then you devolve to backwater savages who are
yeah.
just how it be.
I think so.
And then you just kind of get them to believe something, and they continuously believe it, that they were not it. And because they can't believe that they were it, they will never rise up to be it. So they're a non-factor. That's what I think black people, in the grandest scheme of things, in modern day, are a non-factor. They are a non-state entity that can be coerced and used to the ends of other factors. China plays an active role in Africa. So China is an actor within the context of non-actors. So thus America has to take China seriously, because they can coerce the non-actors into acting in favor of China. It is never in favor of Africans, because they're non-actors. They can't act on their own. They need a thing outside of themselves to save them,
So
to
rather
act.
than a religion, we need to create a secret society. We need a Bene Gesserit of
I think it is. Yep.
Africans. Because clearly you just need a few of the most able
And
to organize the rest.
And probably through culture. Think of what black people are really good at right now: music, art, like creating things. Those influence culture. Think of all the white people who do dances that Africans and black people do.
How would you use it?
You
How is it not a distraction? You remember that black guy from South Africa was like, "We are just dancing, having sex."
The people with the guns are the ones who, like, yeah. I think it's a handshake between the two. I think part of it is what you're always like. It's kind of funny because in different interactions we play the inverse of the role. It's almost Hegelian in how we interact, because you will play one part and I'll play the antithesis, and then between us there will be the synthesis of the core philosophy we sort of kind of end up with.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that on one hand I'm like, yeah, there has to be a compassionate leader who can tell all the other races, hey, we gonna come up, but it's not at the expense of y'all. We'll help build y'all up as we build us up. So it's not us versus y'all, it's just us together. But it's gonna get to a point where you up enough that they're gonna be like, shut that shit down. Think of America and China. There's a political concept about, I forgot the exact name, but America and China are in it. Like, in the concept that America is the dominant power.
Yeah.
China has been rising, and thus America has to contend with the concept of China surpassing them. And thus they're put in a position where they can't let that happen, because you're winners. It's like playing basketball. The Warriors won't lose until the Cavs or anyone else who comes up against them are great enough to beat them, because they're not going to let it go. You're
What
going
would
to
have
let go
happened
power.
if it was like America and Australia? Would they have this issue? You know what I'm saying?
No.
Because it feels like it's really convenient for America to, look at, like, dress China as an other and a scary, like, non-human entity almost, because they're communists. They don't believe like we believe. They're attacking our way of life, and they want. So I hear all this, like, really, like, rah-rah rhetoric, and I'm like, dang, it makes you feel like, dang, if the Chinese take over, the world will be, like, fucked up or some shit, and we'll be under this evil empire. But then you probably go to China, you go to Asia, and you're like, oh, these are just people. You know what I'm saying? It's like when Aaron went to Mali. I feel like I had that experience. I haven't been to China yet.
We should go to China, I feel like.
We should mess with it.
They're friendly
But
to
when
Africans.
when I watch TV and just, like, see, like, especially Chinese videos and stuff like that, I'm like, dang, these are very fascinating, interesting people. They have morals. They have there's a lot of things that I like about Chinese culture.
I do too.
And the way that they've existed in this
And come
hundreds
back
of
up.
years. Right, come back up, and that they pulled themselves out of the mud, right? After the World War II, right, to become, it's like, this is a huge success story, right? So, I mean, are we supposed to be afraid that they end up being dominant, and that what are they going to kill everybody who's not Chinese? Obviously not. They just want to sell you products. Like, will we get cheaper Chinese? Like,
they just want
we're gonna
to
learn
be
Chinese
able to not be oppressed at the end of the day, because the United States is dominant, and thus anyone who will challenge their dominance will be like,
There's a curse of being on top. Is like
yeah,
the crown demands.
the crown demands, because you have to protect your power and your position. It is because of your privileged position of power that
Right.
you are granted these things that are good. Like the reason why everything is cheap and everything comes here, and this is the dominant market to play
That
in.
is so interesting. Like we've been fraternizing with the Chinese for so long, and we've been allies. We were allies with the Chinese against Russia for some time, and that's what ended up leading to the collapse of the USSR. And then China became enemy number one. And I feel like I don't even think China really wanted to be
They don't.
enemy number one, and
They
they're
just
just
wanna.
like, it's almost like when Russia wanted to join NATO, and
Yeah,
they're like,
remember?
wait,
Whoa,
we
whoa, whoa,
literally
whoa.
created this to
To,
oppose you. You're
yeah,
gonna
bro.
mess up our thing.
Yeah, come on, buddy. Go
They,
play your role.
it's like, what's NATO without it opposing you? Like,
Right.
it's like, well, we're not the USSR anymore. Like, we don't care. We
Yeah.
just need an other
Yup.
so this thing can work. And
Yup.
it's just a whole fucking matrix. So, yeah,
It's
we're
a
just being
it's
played.
a fascinating game though, if you think about it, because our generation will have to either adopt that thought process, it is us versus them, or we will have to create, like, because think about it, the people in power right now, 80, 70, 60, will die in the next 20 to 30 years, right? That leaves a power vacuum at the top of people who can come with new thoughts and ideas. And thus, there will exist a point in the near future where the people who are in control right now, who are making the decisions of whether, unless they're reptilians who are going to live forever and continuously influence us to keep being us versus them,
They
that
know
is
how
a
to make
possibility.
successes.
Right? They do know how to make successes, and if you're in that position of power, you're not gonna give up your power, your family power, and disgrace your family. But I think that there's enough of us at this stage where we have technology, we can learn, and there's only a few, like Marx. I'm not a Marxist, but Marx does say we are the populace who make the world go round. We're just influenced by people who are smart and in positions of power and influence, who tell us and indoctrinate us into ways of thinking that continuously make the world go round. If we stop, like in 2020 when COVID happened, and think about it, they have so much power, bro. They said, shut everything down. And everything down around the world shut down for a couple months. And then the people were inside and they're like, wait a minute, I do like not working this slavish job. And then they turned everything back on. And then you were expected to resume your character. But then people were like, no, I don't want to do that. Do you want to be homeless? You can get the fuck out. And then the wheels of capitalism kept turning.
Grinding.
Right? And I kind of feel like there's so much in just all of that we've just spoken about that I feel like the keys to power probably lie within playing both sides, but in that you just want to help both sides win. You, and especially at the beginning when it's easy for you to be squashed, you don't play the side in which you're like, oh, it's me versus the three of them. Kendrick is powerful enough to say it's me versus you and Drake, cause I'm Kendrick. It's big me, nigga. But I mean, America can do that. America can be like, it's big me versus Russia and China and India and whoever who wants to smoke because I'm big me, nigga.
Russia?
Yeah, no, America would fight anybody and everybody at any point in time, bro. If you want the smoke, it's on. America does not. Yo, I have so much respect for America, probably because I grew up here in my puberty years, but also I kind of feel like I respect their concept of the country that made the concept of themselves, indoctrinated their people to believe in that concept, and the people willing to die for this foreign concept. But at the end of it, they were pilgrims who were British people who started off on the other side, and they said, pay taxes to the king? Not if I have something to say about that. Me and my 12 other niggas, we not going with that. We're going to write a new constitution. Yeah, this is saucy. What you think about this, John Jefferson? Shit, I think you snapped on that, George Washington, or whatever. Whoever who came up with it. But you kind of see how, they then created a new brand, a new identity, a new type of British people who are separate from British people, but still stem from British people, stem from European people. And because of that, they ended up with such a dominant powerful country. America
took
is
like 200
so
years.
yeah, it is. It did end up in 200 years.
This is what the Mayflower is 1642 or something.
Yeah, dude.
Mm.
But they started it, and I won't be around for 200 years. Neither will you.
And that's the thing too. You can't like when you start going that way, especially when it's like this early where you don't have any momentum. You have to like lay groundwork that's going to
You have to be the Bene
outlive
Gesserits.
you. You
You
know.
just have to do the Bene Gesserit thing. You lay
Mhm.
the seeds so that, and you like the Bene Gesserits is kind of ironic. It's a
You
secret
have to play
society
a
of
long
people
game.
who play the long game. It's
That's
a secret
true.
society of people who play the long game. The Bene Gesserits laid the groundwork.
That's why I was like, at some point, I have to consider the idea that maybe, if we can think this as the common man, then the person, the people at the top here, like, why wouldn't they have already organized and
Considered it
executed
and
on
then,
this?
yeah.
And there is like Illuminati type force out there,
Yep.
like.
A peasant like myself thinking such thoughts as much as I
They
can
have the
study.
agency to execute it, and they have the country clubs to have meetings and
They have the power,
the power to
the resources.
And I just hope the end goal of like once you get that powerful and it's like,
Oh wow.
do you really care about doing like
Genocide? Yeah, I don't know where that came from, bro.
do you really care about the ups and downs of who's up and who's down, the crown and something like that? Or is there a bigger game and people like the Masons and shit always talk about this is a great work, and you look at works like Interstellar and Space Odyssey, and it's like the goal to just guide humanity because that's what the Bene Gesserit do, right?
Yeah.
They guide humanity through conflict so that can form basically evolve in the way that they want it to. Of course, they're they're playing God.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, it's fascinating. But
We
this
should
was a
end it here.
great discussion.
I think so.
I think
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the other one.
please convert to the poly religion.
The polyistic one. Coming soon.
Pick up your
Releasing
poly Bible. And
right.